The weekly wave. Oh, I can't spell the nose. The weekly wave. Oh, can you tell me who? The weekly wave. Did you see
Song performance. I really just like having people be available to
I'm glad stop
play
by.
individual
Take
parts.
it to 'em, baby.
You're like busting a song, but by no means like play the full thing. It's just a performance for you.
Take 'em up again.
Let's talk about a hook. Go over it a couple of times or something like that.
Oh, can you tell me who? The weekly wave. Oh, yeah. The weekly wave. Did you know? The weekly wave. Shibuya, Chris Robinson. What's going on, brother?
How are you?
I'm great, man. Again, thank you so much for making the time.
Of course.
I was reflecting on this earlier today, and there's not many ways of getting around the fanboying of it. But I'll never forget the first time I saw the Young Heirlooms at Southgate House, and then I got so obsessed with what's the album that has Silverglade and Bury the Hammer?
The Hammer.
Okay,
It's just
cool.
called The Hammer, yeah.
Yeah. That whole album was on a constant cycle for me. And then for the last couple years, I hadn't really dug back into it, and I was playing it today. Who plays upright on that album?
Kyle Elkins.
My goodness.
Great. Classically trained. you
Yeah.
know.
Wait, and really well recorded. I felt like the robustness of that is not something you normally feel from an upright. Most of the time you get that that well carried resonance, but it's a little bit more I don't know, it doesn't have the dominance that he really did in that. Like I think on Silverglade, like you're staying on D or whatever that one is, and he makes this one move that just shifts the whole room. And like I almost took my car up to a speed that was unfortunate. I was vibing pretty good.
That's incredible. I'm honored to hear that.
Do you visit that material much anymore in your life, or are you the type that once the record's out and you're done touring on that particular piece, it's on to the next?
With Heirlooms, with Kelly and I, we've played a lot of the same material for a long time, and we've really, really done a lot with it. And you reach a point where you kind of get tired, and so to answer the question, some of the songs we still play, and some of them we've shelved and kind of moved on from because, life's changed. A lot has happened since that record came out.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's, especially with something that feels so refined, it feels like y'all were the type of band that's going to practice and practice before the world sees it.
That's what we did.
Yeah, and so after that point, it's like there's not many changes to be made once we've made the decisions that we have.
Right.
So as you two come back together, especially in a variety of configurations, whether it's the band or it's just the duo shows, do you revisit that material to relearn it, or is it still subconscious?
It's always there,
Yeah.
I joke about it being like software. Like, well, this is Silverglade 5.0 or 5.2. A lot of songs have gone through like so many iterations and revamps and stuff like that, but she and I are actively trying to write new, fresh stuff. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We have a handful of songs that we have taken from, the experience of the pandemic shutdown and all of that craziness,
Yeah.
And she had a child in 2020. So
Good for her.
A little boy, little Louis.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. A lot of life has happened. So our perspectives have shifted greatly.
And as that's happened, what's the songwriting process between the two of you kind of evolved to look like?
It's still at its core, it's true collaboration. Like we are always melding each other's ideas together. That's it's always been the process. We've tried to work with other songwriters in the past, and it always kind of ends up being it's about like making it work for the two of us. It's always been the Kelly and Chris show,
Yeah.
much to some people's chagrin, I think. But to kind of, bounce to what you're saying as far as like relationships kind of come and go in the music scene here. And it's we've held steadfast, and I'm so grateful for her,
Yeah. Well, and to touch on that, it's like I was reflecting on a musical divorce in my life, as I call it. And sometimes there's there's bandmates that are a big part of the arrangement, that have things that kind of outline the essence of the song. But when it comes to vocalists and lyric and portraying things like that, you really need to have a set of parameters where you do your best work, especially with a project like that has a very clear and kind of declared vibe and sensibility to it. You know, there's a coherence through everything I listen to with that. Does a lot of the ideas that you pitch in any group setting come from a book of personal lyric or voice memos, or are you the type that waits till you're there?
It's voice memos.
Cool.
You know, when she and I kind of come together, I bring some kind of guitar idea musically, and then we just hash it out. We sit there and really hash it out, and she's so gifted at coming up with the right words. You know,
Yeah.
Generally, I'm not a words person, melodies all day, but I've never really found a knack for lyrics.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it's a really difficult thing to. A lot of guitar players, we have things that feel good underhand. It's part of your personality, what tends to come out of the instrument. But for someone to provide lyric to your chording and then to revise melody to better fit your chording and the song's potential is a really foreign thing, and you have to be super comfortable with somebody to be able to pitch those ideas in.
Very much.
Does that happen in the moment, or does that happen after time of playing the songs together? Like, do you like to hash out loud to sing and to re-sing, or is it lyric on paper, look at it, and then start to decide how it's meant to be shaped?
No, it's definitely on the spot. You know, like, all right, play that verse progression again. She's like, just keep drilling it, like keep playing it, you know, and we'll find the words, and it's like I'll chime in where I can, but you know, ultimately I like, you know, she does what she does. But it's like, ooh, this would be really good if it could go this way, you know, or like I'll run through the set of chords I think would work, and she's like, no, not that one, no, that one would work here, let's do that, you know.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And with guitar ideas, are these mainly like lines that you're playing, or is it chord progressions that feel like buoyant to you, like they could hold something?
It's all about the progression. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's all
So
about.
what kind of electric player has so many great chord ideas? I mean, that's such a foreign thing to me. You know, I'm an acoustic guitar player at the basis of who I am, and obviously I've seen you do both very well.
Thank you.
But it seems like a lot of your interest seems to come back to what's over the electric.
Yeah, it's my first love, for sure. So I don't know. The pendulum always swings back and forth. I went heavy acoustic, and kind of like the peak of, like the beginning of Heirlooms was like an Americana sort of thing. Like I was against bringing an amp out. I was not into it. And then I started to get the itch again, and then I felt like, wow, I haven't really done a lot of electric, and I've kind of like lost my chops and sort of just really disassociated after like 2010, 2011. You know, I was pretty burned out on playing electric guitar at that point.
And was that because you were playing it in so many projects and teaching at the time, or?
No, it was part of the process, I think, with, you know, the brief stint I did with Walk the Moon. I was kind of like over it, you know, overhauling a big amp around. I just was like, I want to play acoustic. I want to play music that is different than this, you know. And so I ran to the opposite end of the spectrum and like really, really dug in on that and acquired a bunch of acoustics and a Martin 12 string and just really honed in on that because, you know, I grew up on Beatles and Dylan and James Taylor and stuff like that. And I've always had just a knack for like big melodic, cool sounding chords, you know.
There's something so intimate about being a kid who's starting to experiment with the guitar more than just regurgitate on guitar.
Right.
And acoustic and new chord palettes is such an interesting thing. Like, when did you start playing chords that felt like they were your voice as a songwriter?
That's a great question. I think I've always sort of been interested in chords that have melodic dissonance, I guess is the term. It's a little bit dirty, but at the same time it's kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, especially if it's starting to serve a purpose, like that note in Silverglade where this this bass has taken us from being on the one to now feeling this internal, like you're condensed, you feel tight, and you want the relief, and then the chorus turns left, and it's like, oh wow, they played me a fool again. I think we as listeners don't always know that we want the play of dissonance, but the first time you wield those chords and you start to figure out how you can kind of escape from within the puzzle, it's like you tie the knot to untie the knot.
Right. I feel like in the history of the group, I think sometimes we didn't really know where to fit in because we're not like a traditional Americana band by any means. But we're not necessarily like a full like indie rock band or indie whatever. You know, it was somewhere in between there. And at times it felt like, well, we're not just 1-4-5 band. You know, I want to play something that's, like you were saying, like these moments, they're like aha moments where they catch you off guard. And it's like, oh, that's musically interesting. I'm interested in music like that, and I'm going to continue to write stuff that's like, oh, that's okay, cool.
Yeah,
that's not expected.
Yeah, well, and it's difficult to be in a group and be the one to label what the group sounds like. You strike me, and have always kind of struck me as an artist of the instrument, and you play the utility for what the song is called for. And through a wide variety of projects, that means very different things for your hands. When did you first find out that you could serve that role? Were you the guy that joined every band in high school, or were you a band starter?
Heirlooms was like the first group I feel like I helped start. You know, Kelly and I like founded that group. So that was like born out of, you know, wanting to do my own thing, like post Walk the Moon. And I was inspired. I was like, well, I saw Nick do it. And it was like, this is doable. I think I can do this, but I can veer in a different direction.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's the process is interesting. I feel like my goal is always to collaborate, you know, so it's about the collaboration with who else is in the group and how that blends together. I don't necessarily want it to be like the Chris show, you know.
Yeah. Well, have you always felt that does your playing sound like you in your own mind, or do you feel like the chameleon of whatever needs to happen in these things?
I enjoy being the chameleon for sure. You know, I feel like there's points where I, you know, voice myself or like do my thing, and there's other times where it's like I enjoy serving the song and just being the dependable player, you know, that just play the part just right,
yeah,
you know, or with the right kind of feel and, you know,
yeah,
punch.
Well, especially for a gig like Walk the Moon, and what kind of era were you in the band? It's like the and the Sun times,
just like the year that song got released, you know.
Well, for such an effects-driven band, for such a soundscape of an indie rock group, and I think there was a little bit of an indie movement in that direction that was less guitar-centric.
Heavier synth.
Yes, but the guitar was still a big part of the platform of moving those pieces forward. Is that what drove you to something as stripped down as acoustic, pseudo-Americana kind of sounds, or is that just the basis of how you play?
That's a great question. I think I just was desiring something different. I think I just wanted to do something more classic in a sense, you know, or just I wanted to touch a different genre, you know, really at the end of the day. And the Heirlooms project has like always been that outlet for me.
Well, I've been thinking a lot lately about like there's so many dimensions to consume a song at, and where guitar parts of like really well thought out, well crafted, but not fast paced movement, you know, like very patient playing. It's more appreciative in a genre like James Taylor would come from, or Bob would come from, or Beatles would come from. And as technology, as pedals, as DAWs have allowed for the guitar to be reshaped, everything's ended up being a bit more like a synth, where it's like, just start with something that's malleable, and we're going to make this thing serve its purpose in post. And you don't strike me as one of those types of players necessarily. Like, I definitely believe you could do it.
Right. I insist.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's one too many takes.
In a recording setting, do you kind of steer the this is how we like to track? You're a live room kind of guy, or are you like by myself, meticulous?
I like definitely, at least with the hammer that was recorded live, but we did it at Audio Grotto in Newport.
Beautiful.
With Cameron Cochran engineering, and then Ashley mastered it for us over
Awesome.
there. So very Audio Grotto kind of centric, meaning that like that main live room that they have downstairs, and that, you know, there was separation. So Kyle was in his own room, and that's why we had such great mic'd upright bass stuff. The three vocalists, you know, Kelly, Laura, and I were in the same room, and the acoustics got kind of recorded there. Drums were put in a different room, and then pedal steel was recorded in the control room. And so we would do isolated but live. So like in the moment, we're playing together.
And who's the fellow that played pedal steel for you?
Steve Hauke.
Steve Hauke. He was wonderful. He was a jazz master guy as well, right?
Totally. I feel like for a very long time, because of playing with him, he was the jazz master guy, and it's like, well, there's no need for me to get one. So
Yeah. That guy seems a little irritated. What's that about? Am I flipping on standby? See, that's what I'm saying.
those wily
For some
Dr.
reason, it gets a
Z's.
little finicky every once in a while. And again, like I never really understood like Class A tubes for certain types of chassis and whatnot. And as much as I like the warmth and the body that you get with the tube amp, that kind of thing I can't tolerate. Especially, are you an in-ears guy, or have you always preferred wedges?
I'll do wedges. You know, I can do in-ears. You know, it's not super ideal in a live setting unless like you've got like your own X32 and like your own mix dialed in, ready to go.
Yes.
And like the latter half of Heirlooms, we had a rig where we would go out and play out with it, but it seemed like sound guys would always, you know, just be so bummed out. I feel, because you have to repin everything, and it's like, this is going to make a problem. You know, like, we love our mix, we have so much more control over vocals, but at the end of the day, it's kind of a hassle. But now that rig is Kostoff's rig now, so it ended up in that band.
Yeah.
So we use it mostly for rehearsals.
And at least it serves a great purpose in that. Like, when you have such a tight 3-part harmony, your ability to have deep articulation with that is so essential. Or to feel it in a room like the first time I saw y'all at Southgate, where that room comes to life when the band is dialed in. Those engineers know that space, and that wood stage takes off the way you would hope it would take off.
Right.
But I'm someone these days that I roll around with a splitter and a helix, and I like plugging straight into there. I know it's going directly into my dome, and if it sounds any different than that, it's 1 degree of separation where I'm like, there's a little bit of risk involved now, and I'm not as comfortable there. You spoil yourself a little bit in that, but then it can get a little bit sterile in that kind of environment too.
I'm still pretty resistant to the digital plug and play rigs. I know a lot of people that love them. Josh Purnell, one of my good buds. I still have yet to find the right sound, and I think they've gotten so much better in the time that I've been playing guitar. Back when I was young, it was like Line 6 had like the corner on the market of like, oh, these sound pretty close. These are pretty spot on, you know. But the technology's gotten a lot worlds better with like the Kempers and
Totally. When there was an era of those things saying they were close meant that they were so far from the original that they were passable. Versus now, I feel like if you really get into the like the IRs or whatever that stuff is, like if you have the ear and the time, you can get there. I'm not that type of person. I wanted to build something that was going to be effectively pretty close to my rig and just way more dependable.
just
like,
consistent.
Exactly. If this pedal board dies, I'm going to Guitar Center. I put a USB stick in the back, and my pedal board's back. Yeah, and that's miraculous. But one thing I never expected was this thing is going to have all these pedals that I would never buy as individual pedals, like a pitch whammy, something as absurd as that. That I have way too much fun with the pitch whammy at this point, just because it's a dumb effect, but I can take him to space with that bitch.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I overuse, it's the Hall of Fame 2 reverb pedal, and it's got this shimmer reverb thing, and the on-off switch is pressure sensitive, so if you click it on and then it's on, and then you go back on it again and like lean into it, and it screams, it goes crazy if you depending on what kind of like body weight you put on it.
Yeah, that's
So-
wild. Is that also the ones like they had like that blueprint thing with the TC Electronic stuff where you can beam
It's
it
that
from
brand, yeah.
Yes, I tried that a couple of times. I was like, this is the future no one asked for. I don't want a Bluetooth settings for my fucking phone.
Right. Whatever's on there, fine. I'm gonna
Yes.
dial it in real quick, and that's gonna be it. I don't get too into that's like with the digital amps. I can't get into the weeds too much because I lose focus sometimes.
Yeah.
And patience.
And so when it comes to your electric playing and its relationship to pedals, like where do you really like to sculpt? Is it compression? Is it a couple of overdrives or distortions?
It's definitely layered. I have like this Opticomp pedal that like is an always on, and then a Dunlop line driver. It's like a one knob, that kind of thing. Those are pretty much always on. Then from there, I have like an EQ I'll kick on that generally just like makes everything like louder and beefier if I need. But then I still have like my, OG like full drive 2 that I like never have taken off the board. But
Yeah.
I've been really getting into this Wampler Tumnus pedal, this Klon copy. I really love that on top of some overdrive when it's like it's screaming. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
And does your chain typically stay like that, where you go compression to this little like one knob preamp and then EQ?
Then it's on my main. I have like 2 boards, but my main board it's EQ, then volume, then those compressor overdrives, and then the distortion pedals, and then modulation. I have a Juliana chorus, and the Strymon Flint
Cool.
tremolo that's been on the board pretty much ever since I like swung back towards electric guitar. It was like I need a good. At one point, I was playing a Fender Excelsior. It was like a 5-watt, 15-inch speaker amp, but it had nothing on it besides tremolo. It was like on off, just like a one knob thing. So I needed some kind of reverb tremolo situation that I could control a little bit more. So
Yeah.
I've had that ever since 2012 or whenever.
Yeah, I was very ignorant to the use of an EQ pedal on a board because I never saw it as my job to sculpt that out until I started to realize how it plays into the rest of your effects chain.
Oh yeah.
When did that kind of occur to you as a player and start to utilize that early in the chain?
I'd say within the past couple of years, it's been crucial to have that in there. I feel like in other rigs I've been able to get by, or I don't know, at this point, to my ears and my taste, sometimes you really need that extra. Or in the band, it's like the tone sounds great, but then when you need to solo, it gets lost. Like you need that extra bump, like mids and highs or something that's going to like really cut through the mix, in a solo situation.
And are you someone that sees that quantitatively? Like you're looking at like 4.5K or 2.5K or...
They're visual. I don't necessarily think 100% like, oh, this specific frequency. It's more just like not a smile, but like I'm visually like doing it,
Yeah.
For me, guitar is visual. It's like a lot of patterns. It's not necessarily, learned by rote necessarily. It's a lot of like visual based kind of things.
And were your initial like learnings of the guitar lessons where you were shown the boxes and kind of played through that, or?
I essentially am self-taught. I grew up in a really musical family. Both my folks are music majors. My dad's a pianist. My mom has her master's in flute.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
I grew up like out of the womb, like just music all around always. You know, it was always something going on. They've always taught private lessons, and so I've been exposed
in the
to
home.
Yeah, in home. So sometimes, as a kid, you can't help but be disruptive. So
I'm sure
we're getting in trouble. Like, oh yeah, someone's taking a lesson there. Whoops,
Well, especially for those two instruments where it's like it's the perfect combination of, we get 6 notes max. Okay, if you want to play your cowboy chords, this is as dense as a chord can be. Versus you watch someone who really has touch on piano and the depth that they can add in with 10 fingers and how those notes play together as a kid that can sit underneath a piano and get a feeling of that.
Totally.
And then turn to your other parent and they're monophonic as fuck. They can take that only one place at a time.
Yeah, she can shred.
Yeah.
She's been playing over 50 years. Like
That-
she can hang.
And what's her background musically? Is it like jazz or classical?
Classically trained, but they're both generally more jazz players at this point. My dad's played in big bands, his whole life. So he's done a ton of jazz. But they'll do gigs together, which is super cute. So they'll, play flute and piano gigs together and do a lot of jazz tunes.
And do you feel like you looked at music as a more intimate thing because you saw that as a love language between your parents?
I'd say so. Yeah, I think it's always been a way of life, and I feel like in spite of music not necessarily being like the most lucrative thing to do, it's a very easy thing to be passionate for me and invest time in and continue that way of life, because it was learned from seeing them be so active,
Yeah. Well, I think watching bandmates and the way that they treat each other has a lot to do with the way they play together, for good and for bad. We've all had moments of very tense band interactions, and moments of just like you're musical lovers in that way. What I give you is what you give me, and then together we culminate in something that is so in phase that we've dimed this thing that the room is screaming in all the right ways.
Right.
And as that kind of pushes you to be not only a young player, but to look for those kind of musical relationships. Like, where did you first find yourself playing with other people outside of the home?
In high school, I had some high school friends that also played music, and I think I was like 15 or 16 when I first picked up guitar. And
did you play something before that?
I mean, I'd grown up playing like recorder and then trumpet, when like fourth grade through like sixth or seventh, and then by like age 15, my family had acquired a bass, and I'd started to kind of fool around on that, and it started to make sense. But then the story I always tell is like my dad and I were watching TV, and it was like Eric Clapton on PBS or something, and he's like, "Hey, well, could be you, if you,
Yeah,
that kind of thing." And so we went to Sam Ash and sold the bass, and or it was Mars Music at the time. I was just
nice.
Mars to date myself. We got a little blue Squire Strat, and I that was my first electric guitar, and it's still in the family. I don't. It's not my possession currently. It's like at my folks' house or whatever. But I still have my original guitar. I had like hacked it up when I went through a Eddie Van Halen phase. I took the pickguard off and had a humbucker in the bridge and hacked up the pickguard, and it's in pieces at this point. But a lot of my formative years were like spent in a bedroom playing along with CDs, playing along with records, and discovering tabs. Just kind of like by ear, figuring out how to like sound like what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Did you ever go back to being a Strat guy after that first guitar?
It's very funny that you bring that up. No, because every time I try,
resentful.
literally as of yesterday, I was my mom was trying to buy a bass. She picked up guitar a couple years ago, and so she's like, man, I want to try to play bass. So I helped her buy a bass, and I was shopping for myself, of course, and I sort of had this thing in mind where I want that plunky 2/4 position Strat sound. I want it, I want that sound, but I don't want the controls of a Strat. I do not like the volume knob being right where it is. I feel like as a true blue, I love my telly. I will always be pro telly. Like, you could throw Strats in the trash as far as I'm concerned, because I love tellies so much more.
It is so much. It's a block of wood that does everything it needs to, and 3 switches and 2 knobs. And I didn't fully comprehend everything that Gibson's had to offer in the 2-volume, 2-tone, and a 3-way switch. I never blended in my middle pickup. Everything was dimed.
It's either one extreme or the other. Yeah,
exactly. And there's nothing to be found there until you start to play the in-between.
Right. The in-between, and kind of, if you roll off the neck just a little bit, you get this like unique sound, Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the Jimmy Page sound.
And then you're able to go just to your bridge if you want to scream. Mm-hmm. But then you can come back to something that still has substance without being this, muffled, awful sounding piece. Mm-hmm. Like, I got a 335 in there that I love dearly, and it's got shawbuckers, so this thing gets mean. But I wasn't using it right for so long until I started to play in between there. So, but go back to tellies. So, like, when did you make the transition as a Fender fan?
I had dabbled in tellies before. I feel like I had like a Highway 1 you know, in like the early 2000s, it had like a couple, but like they'd gotten sold, and I'd kind of like let it go. But I had held on to this. It's not a burst, but it's like an orange flame top Les Paul. That was like my number one for forever, you know. And I held on to it for a really long time, and then sort of was just getting away from that and wanted to get into more acoustic. So I sold it and bought a Martin D18 or something. I sell a lot of guitars to friends, so usually they're not too far.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Susan Morgan. Have you worked with her at all?
I feel like I've heard of Susan. Who's she play with?
She does management around town, like locally. She's
Cool.
like done booking or whatever, but she's
Susan that does double forte.
double forte, of course.
Yes. Okay. Yes. That's
She's a Gibson fan, so she helped me out and bought the guitar and helped me kind of get in the direction I wanted to go, because I was really getting into the more acoustic stuff during the Hammer, especially. So it's like that D18 was a workhorse. My number one acoustic is a 1959 J45.
I feel like I've seen you play that.
Yeah, I think the time we jammed together at Habits,
Yes.
that was there. So that's like I would run into a burning house for that guitar.
Yeah.
I'd let the rest of them burn, but I would get that one.
What a great testament.
Right?
I'm convinced at this point in my life that I can only buy lifers, because the process of selling guitars it's painful.
tedious, yeah.
It's tedious because to recoup what you put into it, especially as someone that likes to, you acquire guitars and you make them better, it seems. I normally buy something if it's ready for me, and if it's not, that's probably not the guitar for me. I have a hard time seeing its potential and then accessing that kind of a thing.
I've been in that situation, or I've held onto the guitar, you know, and it's like I didn't really find a love for it. Like my first 335 was a Black Dot. It took me like a year to like really love the guitar. You know, I'd gotten with the intention of like really keeping it, and then eventually found a love for it. But then it was like notorious for like not staying in tune, so like I got rid of it. But I went through like a different 335 and then had a 345 for a little bit, and shouldn't have let that one go.
Yeah, the 345 is the one that has that 10...
The Veritone, the extra chicken head knob thing, but essentially it's a 335.
And so what does the Veritone do?
It's supposed to like squish the sound and like make it real like honky, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't like them, and they take them out of the guitars. You know, it's sort of like, so with it off, it's great. Everything sounds awesome. And then as you click it, it's like, this is just getting worse and worse. Why am I? I'm going to turn it off because I don't need it.
Well, I feel like there's a popular resurgence of those because of Marcus King.
He plays the 345.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a grade A motherfucker.
Right. I think when you have the right guitar and the Veritone's working, I think, you know, in the positive, like it can be a great thing, but it did not help that guitar at all.
Yeah. There's so many artists that are loved because they don't look like what they sound like. That dude looks like a toad and sounds like an angel, and I fucking love that.
He can wail. He's such a great player, great singer. It's like very impressive.
I think there's a really nice era of guitar player music that I've been worried in my young adult life that we as folks that grew up with guitar player music and Guitar Hero really even pushed that to the next level.
Totally.
Just in popular understanding. But we're now seeing all production move to, it's easier just to have a USB keyboard than to ever buy a set of strings or an amp or deal with any of that stuff.
Totally.
So I thought it would fall out of popularity. But now you have these new heroes like Billy Strings and Marcus King who've just made the classic sound so much sexier again.
Very much. To date myself again, I feel like I was learning guitar in kind of the worst period. In my opinion, the worst period of guitar is that post-grunge, you know, I was graduating high school in like 2003, 2004. That was when I was like really picking up with guitar, and like guitar music was like anti-solo. Like it was just not great, you know? And I loved that I've seen like the guitar solo really come back like in fashion. I feel like there was a period where in just some music it just wasn't welcome anymore. Or just people are like, I'm tired of that. Or like back to the topic of like synth and, you know, bands like the Killers and stuff like that. Like it becomes less of a primary instrument and more of like a supportive textural instrument.
Yeah, it's a percussive member of the chordal category.
It's not like like people aren't doing that kind of music really, you know, at least at the time when synth pop and all that stuff was like really, really, you know, popular.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the category of solos, are you someone that you're obviously very well thought out in the what and why of what you're playing? Do you write a solo and play that solo?
With Heirlooms, there were a couple that I played same way every time. With groups now that I'm playing with locally, if there's an opportunity for a solo break, it's always improv. Always.
Do you have any preference for one or the other, or a happy balance?
I like improving.
Yeah.
I like to see what's going to happen and find it. The times when I do find it and it's working, it's like, wow, I kind of been impressed myself. That's cool. Or other times it's like, I kind of missed it there. Whoops. Sorry, y'all.
Which is a great moment too. Like it's great to find yourself like in the same way that the chords, you tie the knot to untie the knot. If you find yourself just mixed up, totally unaware where the one is or what key we're in, there's something heroic about getting back to the form and being like, okay, even if you don't find it on that song, it's like, next time I won't. And your L's are important in this game. So you've been playing with Maria a little bit, correct?
Crelly?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have. We did the Arnold's thing,
Yeah.
The Maker's Mark, the vinyl thing.
Did Sam Rusher play on that?
He did. Yeah, he played bass.
I love Sam.
Yeah. He's a gem.
He's a monster of a player. He's one of those folks, too, where he'll stretch what I understood that chord could do because he'll drag you into places that make you feel like you're in a knot, and you got to wait for him for it to go back there. But Maria's one of my favorite band leaders that sticks to acoustic, but she'll rip your goddamn face off on there.
She's got all the charisma that anyone could ever need,
Yeah, especially for it to be a small lady that you didn't expect this big voice, and then comes some big flat picking, man. It's just hard and heavy.
Exactly, yeah. She can hang. Like, her flat pick stuff is incredible. It's great.
Yeah, so between a project like that, which is, I'd say it's almost outlaw country, to something like what Jess Slam does, which is like an ambiguous soul project.
Soul pop.
Yeah.
It's R&B at times. It's funky. It's a little bit of everything.
And then Warren makes it this incredible soundscape that it frees up so much else for you to do in the single note category.
Very much. He and I feel like are kindred spirits because we love playing ambient sounding stuff. So when I kick on the Strymon reverb and that Hall of Fame, and I've got like a lot of reverbs going, and we're just kind of like, woo, just doing,
just floating.
Exactly. That's the best time.
It is, especially when you're working with two. I have a hard time in two guitar player environments of finding where we're gonna cross over and you get to go to the top and I'm gonna be in the middle here.
I am always conscious of that. I think having gone through it with Steve Hauke playing in Heirlooms, we were always like not trying to step on each other's toes, ever, and now with a lot of the groups I've been playing with, like Annie D, or Aaron Madrigal. Aaron Madrigal is the name of the group. As guitar too, in a lot of ways, I am always playing second position chords or doing stuff. I'm always trying to voice it differently. If they're down here, I'm gonna be up here for sure.
Yeah.
Kostov the same way. It's like multiple guitars in a band. We don't want to be doing the same thing all together.
Yeah. And as you move towards the upper part of the neck, and feel free to flip that amp on to see if it'll play a little more nice this time. If we're gonna get into that, but when you move up into your upper position A shapes like that, do you tend to strum 4 or 5 strings at a time, or do you thin out voicings?
I definitely thin out stuff. I hang out here a lot.
Yeah. So almost more like C shapes at that point.
Right.
And do you like to mute, with your accessory fingers in that category?
Some
and
cases,
and have that percussive kind of sound to it?
Definitely. Or just playing small chords. I feel like as a kid I would see books with like small, not 6 strings. It's like as a kid I didn't understand that like not every chord is a 6-string chord. You figure out, I'm only using just partial strings. I'm only doing this. I'm only covering this up, or I'm muting this string.
One thing I've really found through the avenue of loopers is to start with a 6-string note is going to limit what I can do with this next harmony. And like that's exactly like what you're saying. For guitar 2 and guitar 1 to play well together, one of us needs to leave space for the other one.
Totally.
And just because you're in first position doesn't mean you're not playing the same notes as a guy that's in third or fourth position. So as you start to venture up there, do you attack the strings the same way with like the same point of the pick, or do you somewhat move into more finger-bound territory, more skin?
It depends. I feel like sometimes I honestly don't even pay attention to what's happening, but if I really analyze what's going on, a lot of times I'm not like chicken picking necessarily, but involving a finger as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and as you start to involve fingers, it's so hard to pull as you pluck to get an evenness about that. When you were coming up as a guitar player, were you a dexterity drills kind of guy, or was it just enough time strumming through and playing how you want to get even?
I think, it was like kind of the latter, like what you're saying. It's just learning stuff by rote and sort of always hitting a point where I'm like, all right, I've plateaued. And then I kind of dwell in that like plateau for a while. And I'm like, all right, I'm in the plateau. I got to get off of this, and eventually I work myself out of it, and then like, all right, like over the years of like, I've figured out how to do stuff. But, when I watch these Instagram guys, play, it's like, that's a different world.
Totally. And some of it, that medium can be so sterile. And I hear things and it's like, what you're playing and what I'm hearing don't line up. So I know there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors involved in this, which I'm fine with, except when it becomes an educational tool. And then it starts to be like you're deceptively pulling off this equation, and I'm not growing from that. I'm just I'm starting to disassociate from the content itself.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, but then you watch someone like God, is Charlie Hunter, the guy who plays the seven string so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the only guy in town I know that does that so well is John Gentry.
Of course.
I fucking love John.
I worked with him so long ago at Buddy Rogers.
Dude,
it was a great time.
He is such like an odd character with the most love. We did one like jam video during the pandemic where I was like, hey, I'll just shoot you this thing and you just rip over it. And he sends me back, like before I hear his tracks, I see he's wearing a Darth Vader helmet. And he's wearing shorts and doing it.
That's a good sign.
Dude, just so boldly himself. And anyone that ventures onto a fan 7-string obviously has some things to say.
Is that the brand?
I don't know who makes his.
Or something,
I think you're on the right.
Yeah.
Because he had that Telly for a while, and then he has this new one he plays. But someone like Charlie Hunter, where you watch this guy really walk beautiful bass lines while thinning up to 2-note chords. And this wide-ass triad has so much more harmonic information than our 6-note chords.
I was playing a show a couple months ago with Mal Sullivan, and Stephen Patota and I wandered across the street, and Charlie was playing at the Woodward.
No.
And it was like 25 people there. It's like, and I don't know if it was not promoted well or just people just don't know. They don't know. But he's just back there sitting down.
Just scowling the way he does, yeah.
It's just like massively like a powerhouse of a musician, you know?
When I watched a video the other day, he was talking about a trombone player that he loved that just passed away. And you're watching this power setting where it's a 3-piece section, and then it's him and a drummer. And everything that needs to be there is there. And sometimes I think this will take us to a good conversation of your chord choices, especially on acoustic. But when you start to involve the wraparound thumb and what you can really do with that, at first it kind of extends your playing, and then it kind of cripples your playing.
Limits you at times.
It starts to become a one-stop shop of this is how I make a 4-note chord into a 6-note chord, and it does exactly that. Versus someone like that only uses it as a passing note to go back to these other lines. And I just really can't include my E and A strings so thoughtfully like that. So as you start to build out chords that have the lushness and a little bit of that dissonance, how do you finger around to find those things?
Some of it is like in Silverglade or Over and Over. It's kind of like those two songs have the same kind of tuning, but it's a cut capo. So it's if it were open, it's an E sus chord. So then if I have that, you can add these other one finger, just play them open, and now you got like a one finger chord, and all of a sudden it really widens the chord.
And when you say cut capo, so you're just not including the A and D strings?
It's basically covering A, D, and G. So
That's
it's like
so odd.
It's like an E sus chord there.
Yeah.
And I've capoed it too. So over and over, it's F sharp or an F sharp sus 4 chord.
Yeah.
Essentially. But mixing these, if I had the capo to show you, these like open chords where I figured out these voicings, and then open low strings with the fretted notes. Yeah, it creates very unique sounding chords.
And when you dabble in something like that opposed to like a true open tuning, do you find it helps keep you mentally in a familiar enough box that you can add comfortable shapes without having to consider the displacement?
I think so, and I feel like I'm always dying if I'm tuning too long on stage. So it's like, what's the quickest way to get to an open tuning sounding thing?
Yeah.
Is that cut capo. Throw that on there, boom, boom, you're ready to go.
And where'd you find this cut capo for the first time?
It's just a little shub. It's like, I don't know where. I don't know. I've kind of been aware of like, oh, you can do this, but I hadn't seen someone do it that way. I feel like, I guess you can reverse it. So you can have it as an open E sus or just an open A chord, right? You can reverse it either side.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's its own sort of
and that feels
thing.
like the much more intuitive version of that versus, an E sus is a kind like there's not a lot holding you down. You're floating in a very free but ambiguous space.
I've wanted to do more open, like true open tune stuff. I have this song idea from like early 2020 at some point, where I'm just like stir crazy. If I could, I'll try to get into this tuning. It's just dadgad.
Yeah.
But
when it comes to open tunings, especially like, I think the best example of someone who took it from being a gimmick opportunity to their sound, it's like Keith Richards. You would never know.
Yeah,
it's in
yeah.
an open tuning.
The whole time he's just been one fingering a lot of chords.
Exactly, that straight motherfucker. And he can still competently play leads in these places. That's why I feel like, okay, this is part of his essence. It's not just a means to an end.
Yeah.
Which I feel like when we're all up there and we're trying to tune to get into that for one song, it's like we're plagued with not only is it a bitch, but it feels like a gimmick in some ways.
Yeah, I'm guilty of bringing usually extra guitars, so I'll have an extra tuned guitar ready to grab. That's what I do.
Well, it's a safer bet than putting the audience through that. And then also when the mood strikes, we've spent a lot of time talking about a lot of like some of the more classic body shapes, but every guitar has something different to tell you as the participant with it. From the way that your jazz master bends to the way that you can play in between your pickups on your Les Paul. And if it's not reachable with you in the moment, especially when you're doing more of your improv thing, you don't get to sonically reach for you in that present moment. You're just stuck where you are.
Yeah, it's all colors to paint with. It's like different brush strokes. That's why I like switching. The Jazzmaster I have it's a silver. The color is called Mercury, so it's kind of like a light black haze around it's like a burst, sort of.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I brought silver and gold out, So like these are both very, very drastically different guitars, but they both do some really great things, And it's like on certain songs, it's like it's a Les Paul song, because I want long, full notes like sustaining for days. Can you hit the sustain?
For days.
Go get a bite, come back, hit that one. Whereas like the Jazzmaster has this like, I feel like the character of Jazzmaster, or really any Fender pickups, like they're full of character. They're not necessarily the most punchy high output like a Gibson does for you. They're consistent, full, loud. But like, I love the texture of Fender pickups so much more, especially Tellys and Jazzmasters.
Yeah, they have a curvy contour that sometimes fits perfect versus like a Les Paul was made to be sonically rich and there for you.
Absolutely. It's like, it's a bit more, I wouldn't call it a one-trick pony. It does a couple things really well, but some things it does not do well, I would say.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, it depends on the player. Like I was poorly thinking for the longest time that to get this sound, I have to grab this guitar, and that's how I'm gonna do this. Like, no one guitar should give you one sound. If so, sell your other guitars and get to know the motherfucker.
Right. Dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because you're treating them very fickly, you know. But tell me more about the DAG-GAD tuning in particular.
So this, I don't know. I found this chord. I just was like super stir crazy, you know, cooped up, can't leave the house, can't play shows, and so if you take at the 7th fret, I'm always trying to make things a little hard and or interesting for myself, right?
Yeah.
So I force myself to do these like big stretch chords, you know. So it's not this, it's
You're very smooth with your volume knobs. That's a learned trait that I have not gotten to, and I love watching guys who can really swell well.
oh yeah. Generally, I depend on just the volume pedal. I've like really honed in on that. But when I see people just do on guitar alone, it's like, oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, well, especially tellies, which are made for. Like, if you got one of these weirdos with a long pinky that can just rock that thing. Yeah.
The Jeff Beck sort of.
That's exactly what I was about to say. It's almost like watching Jeff Beck with the perfectly bent whammy bar. Terry Fluharty was one of the first people to tell me, like, what you do is you get a blowtorch, you heat up your fucking whammy bar, and you bend it exactly how you want it. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I bent my Jazzmaster arm a little bit recently, and it's so much better.
Much better.
My telly that I've had for years, it's sort of like as close as I could get to a Jazzmaster for a long time, but it's got a Duesenberg Bigsby on it, so it's got a much more reactive kind of Jazzmaster-esque feel to it.
Yeah.
And I feel like my time with that guitar, I really, really figured out once I got the Jazzmaster, I was like, oh, this is made to do this so much better. I think ultimately that telly is better without the tremolo, but it's on there now. It's not coming off.
Exactly. When Bigsby's such an interesting sound versus a Jazzmaster's, like the way it recesses into the body. It's almost like what the Floyd Rose eventually came to replace, where you had more than a whole step to go, and you could play through it in that way. Like Jeff Beck would never make you imagine where he is on the neck. He's gonna bend you between half steps, and like that's the ambiguity. But with a Jazzmaster, you can take that whole thing wherever you want it to go, and it's pretty weird.
It's great. In like a heavier group I'm playing with, the Madrigal band, Aaron Magical, they play really loud, you know. So like I'm usually standing in front of an amp, and it's pretty damn loud. And lately in some rehearsals this week, I've been kind of not even turned around fully, but like the Jazzmaster, which you wouldn't think necessarily as like a feedback guitar, like it's loud enough. I've been playing Eric Kronstein's Music Man. It's just like really, really loud Music Man. And I've like got like an overdrive on or whatever, and I'm barely turning like 45 degrees, and it's just like singing sustain, you know, and like where I'm at on the neck, if I slide up to it and hold a different note, like you get these harmonic ringing overtones.
Yeah. And there's something about that fat single coil that like. So what do you really describe a Jazzmaster pickup as?
It's kind of like a soap bar, sort of.
Interesting. So in a P90 kind of family where it just has more wraps around two single pin.
I do have a P90 Les Paul that's like a little bit hotter. I've had like other P90 guitars that were kind of like anemic, like they didn't really do quite what I wanted, or they're just like too shrill.
Anemic is a hilarious way to put that.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me started. I'm having flashbacks to Fountain Square shows.
Yes.
Do you like playing in front of baffles?
Only in wind tunnels, brother.
Right.
Only where there's suction from downtown, baby. Right. So when you develop a chord voicing like that is... it's interesting when it's just you writing the piece and you go for this kind of massive
like, how does
stretch.
that fit in now?
Yeah, when someone now
song?
gives you a beautiful lyric and a 3-part harmony to fit, how do you start to divide the mind to conquer this?
Totally. Yeah, the second chord in that, it's like it keeps the low note here, but the chord voicing changes. Whoa. But it still keeps the bass note going. So the original idea was this kind of like shuffly sort of like just kind of like I'm stir crazy, I'm bored, just like what's gonna happen, you know,
Yeah.
like waiting on the edge. And then kind of coming out of those voicings into like rich,
Yes.
some fretted, some, some open.
Yeah. When you do heavy bar chords like that, I can almost hear a little bit of like trem that I know is just underhand because I know what you're playing through my shit over there. Do you apply different amounts of pressure to kind of get that?
Yeah, you definitely have to be conscious. I feel like that low note sounds very different with an index finger versus a pinky, so I have to be kind of careful about how I do it.
Yeah, but there's the guitar has some breath to it. It's again just a moment of appreciating your playing and the way that you and the instrument are kind of interacting together in that.
Right. I think a lot of guitars just have like songs just sort of built into them also, which is why I'm kind of always chasing some other guitar, or trying to figure out what's the next sound that I want.
Yeah.
So like, as I was saying, like I really thought I wanted a Strat, and then I played some Strats and like the exact model I wanted, and I was like, I don't want this. Why do I think I want this? I want the sound, but I don't want the setup the way it is,
So now that you've kind of come to that conclusion, how are you going to pursue that sound in an alternative way?
That's a good question. It's like, am I going to have to trade something? It's like, how am I going to, there are other guitars out there, the Fat Strat type guitar. There's a PRS model called the Fiore that does the job really well. Like I've been looking for like a maple fretboard, 3 pickup kind of like, I want that plunky sound, that's the sound I don't have, but that's like a $2,000 guitar. So it's like, I don't know if I'm going to do that or just kind of try to forget about it and move on with what I have.
Yeah.
I like
the answer is just to get on.
I'm just always shopping for some guitar, I just like to browse for what's out there.
I think when you're honest with yourself about like sometimes the songs aren't just going to come to you. You need some
inspiration.
Yeah, you need something to kind of interfere with the thought process in a way to kind of pull it out of you. When you write something on a guitar, does it normally end up being tracked on that guitar?
Generally, yeah.
And I feel like that's a deeper issue to resolve then too, because I'm someone that I'll write most things on acoustic. Even my favorite electric lines will start there, because those are what feel most comfortable and intimate to me during those moments of just trying to get to know the song and capture that. I have a really hard time if there's effects and an amp involved, because there's something that's like not conducive to sitting there singing to myself that feels like equal temperament, like the vibe is right. But especially with electrics, when you're talking about soundscapes and the way that they interact with each other, and like a Strat sound or your Tele or your Jazz Master, especially through that music, man, that sounds rad. Is that 212?
It's a 212 or 210, I want to say.
It's thick as all hell.
It's screaming loud.
Yeah, hopefully it's on casters. I mean,
it's on. I mean, it's heavy. It's heavy as hell. Normally, I play an AC15 with them or some sort of Vox iteration. I have an AC30 that I regrettably haul around sometimes.
Yeah.
But to answer your question earlier, I was my primary amp is a little 5-watt Bad Cat. It's a 112 and like a little greenback speaker in it or whatever.
Did you swap it for the greenback?
It had a vintage 30 in it, and the speaker blew at one point. I think
Nice.
I even
job.
harvested it from the amp was like dead for many years, and then I found the right tech to actually like get it going again.
Do you remember how you blew it?
It was one of those things where something quit on it. It wasn't a very well made Bad Cat. It was like it's the Bad Cat Cougar.
Gotcha.
And I took it to the wrong technician who was like, this isn't even worth your money or my time. And so I just assumed that like, all right, well, I guess this is just going to sit and collect dust. And then I pulled the speaker out and threw that in a Princeton there for a little while. And then I just was like, I'm going to bring it to someone else. And they're like $70 fix. I was like, good to go. Although I got it back and it did blow up briefly. It was just like smoking, like, that like electronic smoke for a second.
Yeah, we're like,
I took it back and like think the transformer got changed out on it or whatever. And ever since then, it's been my like if I'm doing guitar 2 or like sitting in with bands and it's not an AC30 night,
Yeah.
the Bad Cat is like my go-to. Gigging, I like something I can carry with one hand, that's why the Princeton was so nice. It's that portability, I don't want to have just a straight pedal board, or like I want to haul something, but I just don't want to haul around a big giant heavy backbreaker, all the time. But there's cases where you need that.
For
I
sure.
think.
Well, and also if there's an affirmation when you roll a big amp into a gig that
People are like, oh,
Yeah.
look out for this guy. He's got this big amp and casters.
there is a big dick moment of that, but there's also like that you've arrived and that you're looking to do something with that amp. Like there's some sweat equity that you're putting into the gig.
Like, I hauled this in here, and there's a reason, because there's a sound that you can't get that with other amps, you know. But that amp, I have an attenuator in, so I'm able to
Get it to smoke.
juice it up, and then turn down the volume a bit,
Yeah. And for more informal settings where you're using the Bad Cat, are you someone that walks in with a pedal board and a guitar as well, or do you go straight in? Okay.
Always pedals. I'm a little too high anxiety to not have like knobs to twist and control, beyond like the 3 on the amp.
Yes.
I need to EQ it at least, or because every room is different, and I get in there like, man, if I don't have that, I'm gonna miss it. So
Yeah.
I'm always bringing a pedal board.
Yeah, especially when you've made such a particular signal path that makes sense for you to be able to sculpt the way you want to sculpt.
Definitely.
Yeah, tell me about this little one knob preamp. What would you say that was again?
It's a Dunlop line driver.
Okay.
It's just like on off, and then just a knob. It's always at 12 o'clock pretty much. That's been a constant for over 10 years on my pedal board.
And how'd you find a pedal like that? Were you looking for something to do exactly that?
I think I was thinking it was going to be maybe doing something. It's more subtle to like very light overdrive. Like if you put it to like 5 o'clock, that's like maxed out. It's like an overdriven tube amp where it just dirties up after 12 o'clock. Like it gives like the right amount of grit at 12.
Yeah.
But usually that's mixed with the Opticomp, the Demeter, whatever, optical compressor.
Yeah.
Those mixed together, I feel like gives me just the right amount of like punch. But is this an EL84 amp? I can't remember.
I have no idea
what those are, but like the tubes that like are in the Bad Cat I'm talking about, and the AC30, the EL84s, there's like this like bitey chime that they have, and so like those pedals bring out that sound.
Yeah.
To me, versus like just straight.
And as someone that spends enough time with these amps to get to know the characteristics without a band and then bring it to with a band, have you come to make compromises before you present it into group settings versus like what you normally like to hear?
Yeah, I mean, now that I have sort of like a secondary board, sometimes I will like curate a board for the band that I'm like maybe playing with, if it's like a one-off or a couple, like a short tour or something. I will build a board for that group, for the time.
Yeah.
Versus like my old tried and true, the one I've had since forever.
Yeah. And is there any project in your life right now that has felt like your full artistic venture that you've been looking for again? Or are you still kind of looking for something that will be your not your one and only, but your primary?
I don't know. I think after spending much time just doing Young Heirlooms alone, I felt like everything was kind of all my eggs in one basket for a long time. And before that group, I was doing the multi-band thing here in town and bouncing and stuff. And yeah, once I lost the ability to play shows, I sort of had like a come to terms moment where I was like, this, if I don't have this, like, what do I have? I love doing this. How can I do more of this? And with things shifting in the group, with Heirlooms, it's like things kind of opened up to start playing with Kostov, and then Maul and Annie, just like really saying yes. I was like a never said yes to people, for a while.
Here's with having a lot of groups that have strong female vocalists. Do you find that having people in that range gives you more opportunity sonically?
I think just my time singing with Kelly, with Laura, I live for harmony, and that's just like where I find my comfort zone. So generally, it's it's not all women bands, it's not all dude bands. It's kind of like a nice mixture of both. But
Yeah.
I'll sing with anyone, really.
Yeah. When I was more thinking of it as a guitar player, but I guess it makes a lot of sense. That's
like vocally.
Yeah, you look vocally to involve yourself. Would you find it to be less fulfilling to just play guitar in a band and not have the vocal opportunity?
At this point, yeah. I feel like that's something I love to bring to the table. But like, I'll sit back if it's not necessary. But generally, I want to be playing and singing.
Mm-hmm. It just feels like the full involvement of the mind and body. I've always felt like you get to a certain level of comfort with either the vocal line you're singing or the guitar line you're playing that the mind has a chance to wander again, and that's almost what we're all trying to counteract in these musical moments. It's like, I want to be just here, and there's certainly times to not sing or to not play where it's harder to stop the mind from wandering, but to not be able to bring your full set of talents to the table does feel like, okay, then this just isn't the right project for right now.
Mm-hmm,
Time to keep looking.
I mean, it's always welcomed. People are always like, yeah, sing harmonies. And
Yeah.
I have an ear for it. I've been really working at it hard for a long time, and so I feel like that's just as strong as the guitar, so use them both.
Yeah.
Use what you want.
Would you say that's really your first instrument? Did you sing a lot as a kid growing up?
No, I think it was pretty self-conscious and sort of not into singing at all. It wasn't until like my early 20s I sort of like dabbled. I was like a lead guitar player guy for a long time, but like never sung. I think for a long time I couldn't really separate my brain to even do it. It was like I would trip up or really get caught up. But I think all my time just strumming chords and doing heirlooms tunes like that, and singing that way, I figured out how to play and sing better and feel more confident. And I've dabbled in some like playing lead and singing as well, which is like its own sort of crazy mind split, to be able to do both in like independent rhythms and stuff like that. That's kind of like, I'm sort of hitting that threshold where it's like, this is like opportunity to get better, but it's very difficult.
Yes. And you can't totally focus on one or the other without losing one or the other.
Exactly. Or it's like, you don't want that to show. It's like he's playing and then all of a sudden I start singing and like the guitar quality goes down. Like, you don't want that,
Yeah. Well, that's a testament to your professionalism and love of the thing. How much do you find that your playing changes as you start to connect to the lyric itself, not just the note you're singing, but internalizing the messaging of the song, like when you're given that from the lyricist in the band?
I feel like it definitely inspires me more to, if it's more of an emotive thing or like when I understand the context of like what's being said, yeah, it definitely makes it more impactful for me as I'm performing it too.
Do the parts change much, or does that kind of come in and stay a constant?
I would say it stays constant maybe, but I don't know. I feel like in a live setting, whatever happens in the moment kind of happens as well, though, at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's, as you add in bandmates and arrangement and whatnot, there's compromises that feel, they have a lot of feeling. Like some of them feel like a loss. Sometimes it felt like, oh, I love this lush chord I was playing, but now there's keys behind me and there's no space for me to do that. So I need to find ways of making that chord into our chord because I initially had this idea of this chord.
Right.
And it's hard without a strong music theory background to figure out what are the harmonic qualities that gave this feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just strings and notes in a certain range.
Well, I will say the most recent acquisition of the band with the heirlooms, Kelly and I found, actually we can thank Warren, he was letting go of a Moog Subsequent 25.
Oh, fuck.
So that's like its own beast, and you have to watch multiple tutorials and read the manual and really, really get acquainted with that instrument because it does so much.
Yeah.
Like from low pulsing bass to like ripping lead lines, like it can do it all. And it is, it's a little bit over my head, but it was my idea to kind of inject it into kind of like the next phase of songwriting. So it's sort of like, what does this inspire from us? Like, what do we get out of this instrument versus like getting a different 12 string or, like I would have 8 years ago or something.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And is Kelly the one playing keys or either? Okay.
So she has a keys background.
I was going to say, to have you leave guitar to go do that, like that as a fan, it would really take me
That would
to
be wild.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not opposed to like playing it, but she's got better concept of like how to play keys well than I do. Like I can make noise, of course, but
Yeah. Well, what a great freedom too to say, okay, you hold down the voicings, and I'm gonna play with the texture, because the Moog is such a different thing that no DAW is gonna replicate what this thing does.
Totally.
Where it's warm, it doesn't like to travel. You know, it's like a fussy bandmate in a lot of ways. Have you ever gone to the Moog factory in Asheville?
I have been there.
There's nothing funnier than finding out that the original theremin was used by the KGB to go spy on different countries. It's like to hear that this is some kind of deep intelligence operation going on. And it's this dude pretty much playing a coat hanger, and it's super rad. And it's like that's the most badass musical history you'll ever find.
I've had a couple opportunities to do some theremin work, and I loved it. I ran one through guitar pedals and a guitar amp one time.
Yeah.
And it was so fun.
That sounds
so great.
Sounds like a feedback issue if you have it in front of a live amp like that.
Not too bad. I mean, I had it like dialed in a way where like I could really play with it with like a volume pedal and stuff. Like I was like working with it. This is forever ago though.
That's super cool.
15 years ago.
But you know that instrument almost it's more ambiguous, but it's kind of a better example of what all artists are pursuing, where you're playing the invisible air and you barely have any touch with what's going on with the physics behind it. Sometimes you're ramming the particulates of what's around you together, and you get this crunchy dissonance, and sometimes you get everything to just shake together, and it feels like we're lifting off the ground, you know?
Definitely.
Are there any instruments at this point in your life that you wish you had a touch for in your own like songwriting venture?
I mean, I'd love to be a better piano player. I'd love to be, I can sort of figure things out by rote because I figured enough out on guitar to kind of like apply what I know. Piano is one.
I was hoping you'd say trumpet. I was hoping you were going to go back to
trumpet.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm over the wind instrument thing. I don't know.
It's such a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Like of all instruments to make sound good, anything in that family where it's like, unless you kept with it from that age, it's just kind of
Forget
shitty.
about it if you don't have like the embouchure for it.
Yeah. And also the
like
diaphragm.
and you're like, you're spitting into this thing. It's just like full of spit.
I didn't expect it to be a sanitary thing. I respect that.
It's kind of just.
You're the son of a flautist. Come on. It's like, right. That's literally a gigantic straw.
I'm not prepared. I dabble.
What's been your playing experience with your parents as you've developed your own sound?
We've definitely done stuff over the years. My folks are really active in church, and when I get opportunities, they ask me to play. Like my mom's playing acoustic, my dad's playing piano. It's like it's a great opportunity to like make music with my folks, and I know that that's important. And when I get the chance, I usually try to do it because it's always an opportunity to give back. I know that they tolerated a lot of days, months, years of my high school graduation amp was a Mesa Boogie 50 watt. It was like a Rectoverb or something. It was a very, very loud tube amp. And I would play that thing at like beyond stage volume in my bedroom along with records.
Yeah.
And very rarely were they ever like, can you turn down a little bit? Like they tolerated because they knew like the more they cultivated this in me, like the further it was going to go. And it's gone like over 20 years now.
Yeah. Could you imagine if you never grew out of that phase and they're like, would you come play Christmas Mass with us? And you wheel in a dual rack. You're like, let's fucking get it.
A couple points, yeah. I've showed up with the big amp or whatever, but so yeah, sometimes I sit and I play bass. I've dabbled in bass, on and off over the years, but really found a love for electric guitar more than anything.
Yeah. When you play bass, do you like flats, 4 strings, 5 strings?
I do 4 string. I do the hybrid, not quite traditional strings. I do the not round wound, but half wounds.
What?
They're like not quite flat wounds.
A little more mellow
They're
than
mellow.
like a Marcus Miller kind of like sounds like steel.
Yeah, like the last time I changed the strings on it had been like 5 years since I'd taken the strings off of it, and they were like new ones didn't sound much brighter. Like they're pretty mellow.
Yeah. And what's your right hand form? Do you walk 2 fingers? Do you try to?
Generally 2 fingers, or like sometimes I'll do like a pulsing thumb thing. Like Paul
That's where I
McCartney.
feel most comfortable if I'm gonna get on there. It's like to walk with the thumb feels like I have the kind of control of attack that I'm used to.
Right. I'm not super into like picked bass, even though with like Annie D, sometimes some of her tunes, I recently we lost a bass player, so she and I have been sharing the bass duties on a couple songs, and a couple of them call for a picked bass, and that's like its own thing. I feel like real fast picked bass is its own kind of thing. I'm still sort of figuring out how to do it right.
Yeah. If I'm gonna play picked bass, I want it to be a Rickenbacker, and my head starts lifting up, and then I'm fucking Lemmy, bro.
Yeah,
then I'm in the mood.
That bass, I love those Rick basses.
So I went to Moeller, and Moeller used to, like many of the other Catholic boys' schools, used to have a lot of religious brothers that were teachers in the school. And there was a math teacher that he taught classes that were far above my pay grade that I would never have him for any classes, but we'd play in the mass together. And he had this 335 that I eventually acquired. Oh,
that's the one.
Yeah, at the end of his life, he had sold me this guitar. He was going to die of cancer, and I had always told him, if you're ever going to sell this, sell it to me. And he broke the news and said, how much can you pay for it? And I'm a high school kid, and I was like, $1,500. And he said yes to that. I was like, dude, that's just wrong. He came out to me a week later. He's like, you got the money for that? And I was like, no. And he was like, what can you do? And I was like, $1,000 maybe? But like, that's not right, brother. Sold it to me in a Bob Evans parking lot for $1,000, and we had breakfast. And I have his name engraved on the neck plate because that's always his guitar. It's like it's on a permanent rental. But I love that dude for putting an instrument in my hands that I never deserved, and I probably never will deserve in my own mind. But he had a Rickenbacker that he sold to the other math teacher we play in the mass with. So, dude, they were balling out some nice instruments.
Really nice instruments.
Yeah, for a really shitty Catholic mass.
What year is the 335?
The 384.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a gem of a piece. But I've always told this other math teacher, like, if you ever think about getting rid of that Rickenbacker.
Give me that.
Yeah, exactly. I would give me that bass. Exactly. It's like that is the one. No other Rickenbacker will suffice for me. If it's not that one, I will never buy it because I'm still going to be waiting in the window. So, like, whenever you want.
Oh, I went through a Rickenbacker phase. I had a electric 12-string. It's like a 330 or 360. I can't remember.
I think it's 360 is the...
There's a couple different ones.
Oh, there's different... Okay, I thought you just meant like the
models or
gotcha.
whatever.
Yeah.
It looked so nice, but it was, like I was saying, like when you're tuning on stage in front of people and it's taking more than a minute, that's a minute's too long almost at some points,
Yeah. What's so odd, the way that guitars agree with themselves and agree with the tunings that you keep them in. Like some guitars are willing to go to the end of the earth for whatever you want to do. Some guitars will stay in standard through like a drastic like wind gust, and other guitars just will never do it.
Or, at points, this guitar is an E-flat guitar. It doesn't necessarily like jumping back and forth. Like if I am going to tune it, I am sort of superstitious at times about like, I don't want to tune that guitar down because when it goes back up, it's not going to be the same. That set of strings is not going to be the same. So
yeah,
there's
something
that
true
happens.
about that. Yeah, there's a certain amount of give in these things, and it's become acclimated to this. I mean, you've intonated it a certain way, so why would you push it through an additional 3 pounds of pressure that's not used to on the neck? I have my grandpa's 1934 Spartan that I always play in standards. Like, this thing sounds choked. And I started doing it a whole step down. I'm like, oh, this is what this guitar wants. And it's weird to find that out, especially when it is like down a half step. And would you capo one at that point and play everything like that, or keep it open and deal with the adjustment?
I've done that with some guitars, or I had a 12-string that seemed like it would benefit better being whole step down, but then like I'm always capoing it and there's like tons of extra tuning, like an acoustic 12-string or whatever. But yeah, ultimately I try to keep things standard.
Yeah.
Standard.
For the sake of simplicity in your own mind. Were you ever a thumb pick guy?
I've tried, but it's so foreign and I have very little control. I've never really put a lot of time into it.
Yeah, the spatial adjustment of almost being off the string, it's like I've learned to get a little bit of nail or just flesh if I want it, but to feel like I have a centimeter of space, it's just like it's very peculiar. But then you watch someone ball on something like that, it's like, God damn, am I missing out?
Yeah, it works for some people, but it does not work for me.
Yeah. When you play on acoustics, do you tend to stay in your first and second position, even for your lead stuff? Like I saw a video the other day of a bluegrass guy saying there's no money above the 5th fret. I never heard that expression, but I was like, that's funny as fuck.
That's one of those great musical, sayings, euphemisms, or whatever.
Bumper stickers.
That's awesome.
Cold hard truth.
There's no money above the 5th fret. That's great.
Yeah.
It depends. I feel like on that J45, I'll do some acoustic gigs with Doug Sutton, who's drummer in Kosoff.
Yeah.
He does acoustic music too, and it's a thing where like if he's playing something and I'm doing guitar too, or just lead stuff, I'll play it on there. It's not necessarily the best lead guitar because it's old. It's got some issues. It needs at least a new bridge saddle, maybe some more work on it. The radius isn't quite fretting, so some of the notes are a little bit dead. Mm-hmm. I can still make it work, but I definitely on that guitar, if I'm doing lead stuff, sometimes if I'm in this 10th fret, 12th fret position, the notes are kind of dead unless I play pretty close to the bridge.
Interesting. And that's what it's like. You might break a string, bro. Like you're getting...
Yeah, it's
that guitar is so loud with nothing else going on there.
Yeah.
That's the best thing about a Gibson is like it doesn't need to be plugged into anything to still be loud
it's
and
just
raunchy.
Sustaining for days.
For days.
Yeah. But yeah, this guitar I acquired, basically I had a 345 and then like the Strat, it's like in my mind I'm like, oh, I want this guitar. So like I chased down this Firebird. I went through like a Firebird phase for like 6 months.
Dude, anything through body, especially a Firebird, like the right mini humbucker sound in Firebird, like, oh my God.
This one was P90s. It was 3 P90s, but the way it was set up was not right. For a 3 pickup guitar, it's like you couldn't lower the pickups. Basically, you were really limited to like an inch in one spot and an inch in another spot, and that's really the only place with room to pick.
Yeah.
It's like this is like a $3,000 custom shop Firebird, and it barely plays at all. And this is like in my number one, like my most expensive position, that's that guitar slot.
Yes.
It's like I've traded up many years to get to this point, and it's like you don't know until you have the guitar in your possession to really learn that this is not going to get better.
And they deny it for 6 months, and you're like, maybe it's just me getting to know it. And it's like weird scale length, no room for a pick.
But it was a non-reverse, so it was like a Jazzmaster body. Ultimately, I got the Jazzmaster that I wanted. I got the body was right, but the setup was all wrong. So when I finally found someone to trade to take it off my hands, that's the thing. It's like I like having guitars, and I have I think no more than 10 guitars or whatever. But like if I trade with a collector, they're not going to be affected like I am. Like if my number one is like not really playable, like it kind of plays, but like it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Like that cripples me as a player versus someone who's got like a couple 335s and Les Pauls and like deep collections. So it's like I ended up with this, and ultimately I just needed a humbucker guitar. I needed something that was just going to do the job. It's like it does that like that regular electric guitar sound. But
there's nothing better than a gold top for that.
Right, and it's a Slash gold top.
Yeah, okay. Dude, the Slash pickups are no joke.
They loud
rip.
Slash buckers. Yeah, so that's all of the heavy stuff I'm doing when I whip this guitar out. It's like, it's got a big heavy 50s neck with those pickups. It's just like it just sings.
Yeah. Well, brother, as we start to wrap this up, is there anything that you'd like to promote?
I got a couple shows coming up this month. Let's see here. I'm blanking right now. End of the month, I have the 29th with Aaron Madrigal, the Aaron Madrigal band.
Cool.
At the Comet, playing with him on the 29th. Acoustic show on the 22nd with Doug at the up in Montgomery.
Cool.
Yeah, and a couple other ones. Yeah, it's weird. It's like any given week I can have 2 different artists that I'm playing with, or rehearsal for a one-off coming up. I'm always kind of revolving sort of, all right, upload the next, upload. Oh, this is, I know this person's music really well, or I'm still learning this stuff. Like I need to brush up on this, or like, don't go into the rehearsal unrehearsed because you'll sound foolish, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you'll sound overspread in that regard. If you're going to venture into many a project that require a lot from you,
Right. I got
Buckle
added
in.
to a motor show. That's why I was like, why is this not on my radar? I'm playing with Annie D. She was doing it solo. Now we're going to do it as a duo. So I always love to hop on with her.
Very
She's
nice.
an incredible musician, and it's just like always so fun to play with her.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing whatever I can, brother. But
Yeah, come on out.
I love your playing, man. Thank you so much for
Thank you for
taking the time.
having
The other day when I saw you, I was like, oh, I don't think he's going to remember me. But I
Of
have to say,
course.
well, you worry about those things, especially when you're at the mall with your mom and you're like... But I've always just been so impressed by the love that you bring to it and your particular sound, man. So thank you for being a
Yeah, of
gem in our
course.
musical community.
Well, thanks, man.
All right. Peace, players.